Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Preemie Chats, and thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm Fabiana Bacchini, Executive Director of the Canadian Premature Babies Foundation, as known as CPBF. We are a charitable organization, and our mission is to empower families of premature babies through support and education. This Preemie Chat series is one of the many initiatives we have to bring information for NICU families and healthcare professionals. Here, every Friday, we talk with experts, researchers, and parents who share with us their knowledge and experience. Also on our website, canadianpreemies.org, parents will find all kinds of resources and support. And today, in honor of World Cerebral Palsy Day that happened yesterday, we are bringing you the story of a mother and her triplets with cerebral palsy. Then I will talk about her preemie triplets, all diagnosed with cerebral palsy, and how their lives changed into a different direction that inspired a charitable organization and the book she wrote, See Me for Me. And I have here, joining me live from Toronto, Geall, who is a mother of 5, a former elementary school teacher, and was the founder of a national children's charity called 3-2B. An organization that supported innovative research and programs for children with neurological disorders and their families. Then as inspiration, Taylor, Cole, and Brody. They live every single day to the fullest. Although they face tremendous challenges, they share a positive attitude and great personalities. As a former elementary school teacher, Dana knows what makes a great story and the importance of follow-up when reading a book with an important message to a classroom. Dana wrote the book, See Me for Me, as a labor of love to her children. Dana's big goals for See Me for Me is to be in the classrooms across the country and beyond, and believes it has the potential to make a big impact. Dana, thank you so much for joining me here today. I'm so happy that you accepted my invitation. I know you're super busy, so I'm looking forward to our chat this afternoon.
Oh, me too. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Wow, that is so great. So let's start with, because our community here are preemie parents, and many of us will have a diagnosis of cerebral palsy, which is a very scary diagnosed when you first hear about it. So let's talk a little bit about your pregnancy, when you were expecting triplets, and what happened, how you ended up in the NICU.
Okay, so that is a big story. So I was, I think, 26 years old when I got pregnant. I was, a healthy young woman, really excited to have children. I didn't find out I was pregnant with triplets until I actually had a little bit of a scare where I had to have an ultrasound at 10 and a half weeks. And it was at that point that the technician, when she had the ultrasound probe on my tummy, she said, you're not having 1 or 2, you're having 3 babies. And I remember the feeling of just being in shock, complete shock and overwhelmed. I didn't even know how to process that information. But once I wrapped my head around it, I thought, okay, well, let's take this on. And I thought, being young and being healthy and all of those things, they were in my favor, that I'd be able to have a healthy full-term pregnancy. But my cervix had different plans. And in the 21st week of my pregnancy, my cervix was almost opening. And so I had to have an emergency cerclage where they stitch it shut. And I was on hospital bed rest, and then I was sent home to be on home bed rest for the remainder of my pregnancy. And I went into preterm labor unexpectedly on New Year's Eve, January 1st, 2008, and gave birth unexpectedly 3.5 months prematurely to Taylor, Cole, and Brody.
Wow. So then when you were pregnant, when you found out you were expecting triplets, was ever a conversation about the possibility of delivering preterm?
Yeah. So we had that conversation once I was transferred, because originally I was at a different hospital. And then once they found out that I was having multiples, I was transferred to a different hospital where there was an expert in multiples. And they definitely, said that there is a risk of prematurity, But given the fact that I was young and healthy, and they have delivered many triplets and twins at full term with, my health background, then they thought that it would be okay. So I went with that, and things did not turn out that way.
Okay, that's the big surprise. So let's talk about the time we were actually going to labor. We had the emergency section. Did you have that conversation that many of us end up having when you are in preterm labor? What can happen to the babies if you deliver at such an early age?
So I'll never forget when I went into labor. I was at home. All my girlfriends actually came to my house during the day that day. They were all going to be going out that night. And they all came over because I was, on bed rest with triplets. We hung out, we had lunch. And I remember after they left, I went to the washroom and I got my first contraction, and I knew this is not normal. Something's wrong. So we rushed over to the hospital, and I was already a few centimeters dilated when we got to the hospital with a cerclage. So you can imagine how scary that is, because there's a lot of complications that can happen with that. The doctors tried their best to stop my labor. And while, you're in the midst of that, and anyone who's gone through it, you're in this mode, in this zone, because you're so not expecting to have your babies at that time. You're not ready. You didn't pack a bag. You didn't anything. And forget the bag. You can't imagine giving birth to babies that are not supposed to be born for another 3.5 months. So everything they said to me in that moment, and I'm sure they listed off a whole bunch of stuff that can happen with prematurity, it was a blur. It was a fog. And I just didn't know what to do in that moment. And at the same time, there was nothing I could do. Everything was completely out of my control. So yeah, it was a blur, and I was just trying to get through it and trying to hold on to the fact that maybe they can stop this labor, and it would be a different circumstance.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about your Nicu days. So when you first saw them in the ICU, what were going through your head right after the C-section, and guide us through your first few days there.
Okay, so I gave birth, as I said, it was just after midnight. So my cervix was at 5 centimeters. They had no choice but to give birth, or else I'd have way more complications. So I was wheeled into the OR literally just after midnight. Everyone was wishing each other Happy New Year. And Taylor was born first at 12:36 a.m. And then Cole came 2 minutes later, and then Brody came after. And they were, Taylor was 2 pounds, 1 ounce. She was the biggest. Cole was 1 pound, 8 ounces, and Brody was 1 pound, 14 ounces. And, usually you hold your baby and they cry and the whole thing. And obviously I didn't experience any of that. They whisked the babies away to the NICU right away. And it was the start of the craziest journey that I when I talk about it, I always get emotional. I said it like this, hopefully I won't, but I mean, it was so hard. In the beginning, they had, they were on ventilators, all 3 of them. They had mild brain bleeds, all 3 of them, that resolved by the next ultrasound, but they were still there. They had PDA ligations, 2 out of the 3. They had all sorts of procedures. I remember Brody had an infection where they were talking to baby about how he might not make it. They were just one thing after another. And anyone who knows, who's been on this journey, you have one baby in an incubator, it's too much to deal with. But then I also had the next baby next there, and then the next baby over there. And I don't know how I got through it now looking back, but I'll never forget a really wise nurse who said to me, and it really changed the way I looked at things, because, I like to kind of be in control of situations, and I was so out of control in this situation. She said, stop thinking about what's happening tomorrow or the next day, let alone like years from now. Let's just focus on the moment. You have to get through each moment and each day once you're ready to get over the moment, and go on from there. And it really did shift the way that I looked at things and help me survive, because that's what it is when you're going through that at the time. And yeah, I highly recommend that to anyone who's in the thick of it.
Yes, and I'm happy you brought that up because we always have different strategies to cope with the NICU. And for me, being present at that moment was also my strategy, not just think about the future, what was going to happen in the future, because you don't really know, right? The NICU, everything can turn around so quickly. And I think that is something that we always talk to parents who are current in the NICU, like just go one day at a time, because you know how intense it is, right? And you focus on that moment. So when you were in the NICU, did you have any education sessions in the NICU? Did you know that the babies could be delayed with their development, or what could we do to help them because they were born so early? And actually, one more question: how long did you stay in the NICU? Because I don't think I ever asked you that.
So yeah, they were in the NICU for the actual NICU and the transitional care nursery. So Cole came home first at 4.5 months. Taylor came home at 5.5 months. And then Brody came home at 6.5 months, only to go back to sick kids for another 2. So it was a long journey. And they were transitioned from the NICU to the transitional care nursery. I think it was after 3 months, maybe, I want to say, but I'm not exactly sure, somewhere around that.
And did you have any education while you were in the NICU?
About the future? I mean,
what was happening, the conditions what they were experiencing in the NICU, and what could you do? How involved could you be in the care of the babies?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was very much like moment by moment was what we would deal with. So if let's just say they had something that they had to get, like the PDA ligation, which was a heart procedure. It's the valve between the lungs and the heart, and how that has to close. And when babies are ventilated, it can't close on its own if they're ventilated for too long. Stuff like that. I had no education of that beforehand, no concept of what that even meant. It was just so overwhelming. But the doctors, did the best job they could, giving me an education in that moment to make an educated decision about what I was going to do. And I just trusted that what they were going to do was going to be the right thing. So, yeah, I mean, in terms of other things that were going on, I guess it was still very much moment by moment getting through it and trying to just, make the best decision for the kids.
Then, and how was kangaroo care? Because we've been talking a lot about kangaroo care. The whole World Prematurity Day this year is about skin to skin kangaroo care. Were you able to hold the babies?
I was.
At the same time, one at a time, two together. How was that experience for you?
So it evolved over time. So in the beginning, when they were ventilated, it was very restricted. So I remember I got to hold Taylor first, our daughter, and it was kangaroo care the first time I held her. And every time I held them was always kangaroo care. And feeling her body on mine that first time, I remember it was the most beautiful moment because I had to wait 6 days to hold her. And there I go. But it was unbelievable because feeling her on me was just such a beautiful moment and something that was so important for the mother to connect with their baby, because all you're able to do up until that point is touch them very gently through an incubator after you put your Purell on your hands. And it's just so sterile and not the way it's supposed to be. And even with kangaroo care, with the ventilator going around my neck and all of the tubes and all of the wires and everything they needed to have on her to keep her safe, it was still so special because I could feel the warmth of her body. And I remember even they used to give me blankets. They were called, I think, hug blankets, if I remember correctly, that I put in my bra because I was not breastfeeding. I was pumping a lot. Oh my goodness, those days as well. And every day they would put the clean blanket that I had in their incubator so that the babies can smell you. And I think those little things are so important for the baby to connect with their mom and for the mom to connect with the baby as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Were you educated on early intervention? Were we going home? What could you do with early intervention therapies? Was that anything like that in your radar when you were in the NICU?
In the NICU, absolutely. There was a great follow-up clinic that was involved when they were in the NICU, and they would give me an education on when babies are born extremely prematurely, especially, but all premature babies, early intervention is so vitally important. And I mean, I was so committed to that as a mom that I knew that as soon as we left, we were going to do everything and anything that we could to help my kids catch up and, you know, meet the milestones that they needed to meet. And I'll remember, because that was a whole different phase. Once we were out of the NICU and that survival mode that you're in, you go into a whole different set of things that you have to get through when you're home that, again, you have to like do day by day. But it was appointment after appointment. I couldn't believe how, you know, how much we had to do in order to help the kids get where they needed to be.
So let's talk about that year at home, because that's the year when we, you know, when you're pregnant, you're kind of, okay, these are things that you read that your baby is going to do, those milestones. And then you come home after this roller coaster, and now you have 3 babies, you're doing therapies, appointments. When did you start to notice there was a delay, that they were not achieving, I don't really like the word milestones, but they were not doing what they were supposed to do at the corrected age and beyond that?
Right. So when they first got home, it was like Cole got home just after he was supposed to be born, right? He was the first one. So, you know, I got those, I think it was Baby Center, one of those things. They would send you updates. Your baby is supposed to hold their head up. Your baby is supposed to hold the toys. And they weren't doing those things at all. All 3 of them. Excuse me. Sorry. So yeah, it was, I noticed even, you know, we were doing all this early intervention. We were told by the physiotherapists and the occupational therapists, I mean, they'll never put a label on it. They'll never do any of that. But they would always say they're premature. They were extremely premature. They were in a different bracket, right? Extreme prematurity. That you have to give them time to catch up. And yes, they might not, even with their corrected age, be anywhere close to where, you know, a full-term baby would be, but we just have to give them time. And so, you know, once they were like a year old and they were still not doing things that babies do when they are 6 months old, 7 months old, I was, you know, still committed to early intervention. And I would ask the questions, but it was all too early to tell. We shouldn't say anything until they're close to 2. And when they were about a year and a half, almost 2, we went to Bloorview because we were referred to Bloorview. I mean, when you get referred to Bloorview, you know, you have an idea that obviously there's a bigger picture here and it's beyond just premature things that are coming up. And I had an appointment with the 3 of them. And that appointment changed the course of our life in a lot of ways. It wasn't that appointment, but finding out the information that we found out in that appointment, it confirmed some of the things that we had been thinking, changed things in a lot of ways.
Wow. And that is a day that none of us with a life-altering diagnosis forget. Right? And you receive all 3 of them on the same day. So how was that moment for you and the few days, weeks after? Because we know there are a few families that share with us, you know, the anticipation of going to an appointment because they know something is going to come. They don't know what it is. There is a lot of anxiety, right? Yes. So how was that for you, that day and the days, weeks after that?
So it was a lot. It was a very challenging appointment. They assessed the 3 kids. They did a whole bunch of, you know, range of motion and physiotherapy type exercises with a PT while the doctor watched. And then after they did all their assessments, the doctor came in with the fellow. I'll never forget it. And she said to me that all 3 of them have cerebral palsy, and on a scale, so they were talking about the scale, there's 1 that's more mild and 5 that's the most severe. They were on the severe side, so 4 or 5. And my babies were not even 2, so they were literally babies, and it's hard to imagine what that means for them because they're looking up at you and smiling and laughing and being cute babies. And what this doctor is telling you is that their life is going to be really hard. And I was very emotional in that meeting. I remember they handed me a picture of the scale of what a child, when they're like, it shows like a cartoon of a picture of a child when they're about 8 or 9, let's say, and they're in a wheelchair and their head was down. And I'll never forget that picture because, so you're telling me that my child's going to have their head down. It was just so hard to wrap my head around. And I was, I remember leaving that appointment, and it was almost like I take it back to when it was the time when I was pregnant and labor, had no control over the situation. And that feeling of, I can't do anything because you're given this diagnosis that is going to define, and I do this because I feel very differently now, but define your kids. And I cried a lot, and I was so upset. And then you have to tell everybody, you have to tell your family and your friends and explain it to them, and be there for them, even though you're the parent going through it. And it was so hard. And it's the hardest thing I've ever gone through. And I think the hardest thing, hopefully, that I will ever go through. It was really something that I can't even wrap my head around. But then I think once I got that, because this is the whole thing. They gave me, and I think this is important to say, the picture that was like, they should never give you that picture. And actually things have changed since then because parents have spoken up and said, this picture is not okay. There was also a graph that they gave me that showed what a level 4 child or level 5 child could do and can't do. And it had like dots that were at the top and dots that were at the bottom. And I said to the doctor, I said, well, who's to say if your child, when they're classified as a level 4, is going to be able to do this or not be able to do that? How do you know? They're just babies. And they said, we don't know. We actually don't know. So I think that also, that I started looking at that, I was like, okay, well, why is this diagnosis going to define my kids? It's not. It's important to know so that we can set them up for success. But at the same time, their potential is still great. And I have to hang on to that. And then things shifted.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because I know how hard it is when you're trying to make sense of what just happened and what the future is going to look like. And I feel the same as you, because I was shown a picture of a baby, not in a wheelchair, but on a stander.
Yeah.
And I had never seen a stander in my life. I said, my child is not going to have a stander.
Right.
Well, he does now, but it was so scary to see what.
But now you see a stander and you look at it so differently, right? Like it's like a wheelchair. And before you looked at a wheelchair, it was like, I remember the first wheelchair appointment and how hard that was and how emotional it was. And now I go to a wheelchair appointment and it's like, I'm excited because I know what that wheelchair is. That wheelchair is independence. That wheelchair is so many beautiful things for my kids. And it changed my perspective of it completely.
Right. But it is a journey, right? And you need people to support in that journey, to see that with you or see for you and show you, because sometimes you are blindsided. You can't see the possibilities when you're in that foggy, shocking moment.
Exactly.
So how did you cope emotionally with all this change that happened in your life for those first 2 years? Because we feel that we're drowning a lot of the times in the beginning because we don't know what the future holds.
Yeah. So, I mean, after I got the diagnosis, and processed that and dealt with it in my own way, I really made a decision. I was like, okay, I need to do whatever I can for my children. They're the same people that they were yesterday, and I can't let this diagnosis change the way that I view my own children. I love them unconditionally. And so, we continued with early intervention. We did all of that. We did every therapy under the sun. But I thought, okay, well, what's out there in terms of therapies and programs that can help kids like my kids? Because now I knew, okay, they have this diagnosis. What can we do? So we banked our kids' cord blood at birth. So there was a study happening at Duke University that I tried to get into for kids with cerebral palsy, and we didn't meet the protocol standards for that. So I thought, okay, well, we have the Hospital for Sick Children, one of the best children's hospitals in the world. What are they doing in terms of, research? And yeah. So anyway, so I met with them, and I met with some of the people at the foundation, but I met with people at some scientists, and they were saying there's just such a lack of funding in this area, and they needed to focus on that, and in order for them to develop therapies that can help children like my kids. And so that's how I coped with it, honestly. 3-2-B, which is the charity that was founded, inspired by my kids, and it supported innovative research, therapies, and programs for children with neurological disorders. And it was all born out of this idea that there needed to be focus on children with neurological disorders. And so, yeah, that first year we had a gala. We raised over $500,000. The response from the community was beyond overwhelming and incredible. And from that, we decided, okay, we're onto something. Let's start a charity. And so we did. And that was 8 years of my life.
Wow. And you raised $5 million, which is incredible. Like going through everything that you're going through, and you raised $5 million, and so many researchers benefited from the grant, because we were part of actually one of the studies that 3-2-B funded. That we're so grateful for that. It's amazing, Dana. You are such an inspiration to me and to many other families to see what is possible, right? When you look at families who are ahead of our journeys, and you see your life. I see Brenda, who always talks about cerebral palsy, big advocate in Canada. And we just see you and her doing things, right? Not despite of these challenges, but because of the challenges, right? To make a difference in so many people's lives is really inspirational to me, and really pushed me to do more for this community that I love so much. And I'm so grateful to you. I wanted to talk a little bit about the group that was created out of the foundation. That is a group that is pretty much a life savior to many of us in Canada, parents who have children with neurological disorders. So talk about this group, and I'm going to share the link live on our platforms.
Amazing. So when we started 3-2-B, we were fundraising for research. That was how it all started. But I met this other mother, this powerhouse mother, Brenda Agnew, who you've interviewed, and she's just amazing. And she has a premature son who also has cerebral palsy. And we became friends. And when we talked, we realized there was just such a lack of support for families. And, when you're going through this journey, the premature journey into diagnosis, you have nobody gets it. It feels like nobody gets it. I mean, I had no friends that went through it. I didn't know anyone who was facing the things that we were facing. And there are so many people that are going through it. You just need to be connected to them. And so what happened was we started PAL, which was the acronym was for Parent Advocacy Link, where we started as a Facebook group, and all these families joined, and they would post on there things, anything from like, what socks are good for these orthotics that my kid wears, to I am having an emotional breakdown and I don't know how to get through this day, to my daughter's having surgery and I need some suggestions on how I can get through that. Every kind of topic that can possibly come up comes on there. And the best advice that I have ever received over the years is from other families who have gone through it. Doctors can give you great advice on lots of things, but they don't live it. They don't know what it's like to actually go through it with their child. And so the best advice I've ever gotten is from PAL, because that's where we talk and that's where we communicate. And 3-2-B, through 3-2-B, we had lots of funding programs and all sorts of things for families, which was really, really amazing. But when we closed the doors at the end of 2017 to 3-2-B, on a high, we raised all this money, we did all these great things. We wanted to make sure that PAL, the community of PAL, continued no matter what. And it has, thankfully. So if any family has a diagnosis of any sort, neurological disorders and other disabilities as well, you can join PAL on Facebook, and there are people that know what it's like and can be a great support system for you. And even some people, they don't feel comfortable posting, but you can even do a search if there's something that you're interested in. You can pull up all sorts of information and draw from other people's experiences to help you get through whatever it is you're going through. And I think that's that sense of community, as we know, as moms going through this, it's so important to have.
No, and peer support in general is so important and powerful, because when I left the neonatal follow-up with the diagnosis of cerebral palsy, I thought I was the only mom leaving such an appointment, a preterm baby who had that diagnosis, because I never, to be honest with you, I didn't know about cerebral palsy. I didn't know what it was.
Right.
And I had never met anyone with that diagnosis. So I was very alone. And it was Tima Stein, our osteopath, who introduced me to you and Brenda. And I'm so grateful because of her, we met. I became part of this amazing community, and I never felt alone, because even like when I'm having really bad days, I go there. There's always somebody there, somebody to talk to, somebody who understands how hard it can be some days, right? And somebody just to give you a shoulder and let you cry and vent or celebrate the little things that for us are not little. For us, everything it's important and big. So I'm so grateful that you have this group for all of us to be part of.
I'm grateful too. I mean, it's where I go. It's where I go for any support that I need. I go on there and get the best advice. Always.
Yeah, I think, for us, we're a little bit ahead of the days, but we always see families transition into adult care. And then we see the parents who just got the diagnosis or are still waiting for the diagnosis, and we come together, and it's incredibly powerful. So peer support all the way. All the way. So, but I want to talk about something else that you brought it up earlier when you were talking before we started this live session, because a lot of parents who experience preterm birth, they want to have another child. And that is a very anxious time, sometimes a traumatic experience. So you end up having 2 more babies a few years later.
Just a few, 10 years later.
So talk to us about that first pregnancy. What was going through your mind? How did you get prepared? Were you at high risk again of delivering preterm? So how was that for you?
Okay, so I always wanted to have another child. 1, didn't know I was going to have 2, but 1. And it took many years to be ready. I also got remarried. And so after, in 2017, I got married, and in 2018, we had Jagger. And to get to the point of being ready to have another baby I was definitely ready at that time. It took a very long time. It took a decade, literally. And you can imagine being a 26, 27-year-old woman having the triplets, and then being 37, 38 with Jagger. It was like a whole different experience. But I went in before I had decided to get pregnant. I met with my doctor, who was a different doctor at Mount Sinai. She was unbelievable, Dr. Jackie Thomas. She's unreal. And she did a whole workup, just like a checkup on everything to make sure everything was good. Everything looked great. And I got pregnant really quickly, actually, luckily, with Jagger. And she, even though everything was great, my cervix, all those things were fine, she took all the precautions. So she put me on, she did a cerclage, not an emergency cerclage. She did let's just do it early in the pregnancy, just in case. It held up beautifully. I went to full term with Jagger, and I was checked very regularly. I was considered high risk because of what happened with the triplets, which meant basically that I got checked every week or every other in the beginning. But it gave me peace of mind because I was a nervous Nelly the entire time. I was so worried about what could happen because I know what could happen. And he was full term, and I was in labor for 26 hours with Jagger. I tried to do it naturally with an epidural, and that didn't happen. So I had to have a C-section. but it all went well. Everything was good. And then we had another 3 years later, and Liv, and she also was full term, planned C-section for this one, and everything was great as well. So I was so scared to get pregnant again, but I am so happy that I took that leap. And I think just making sure that you get checked beforehand, make sure you get the green light from your doctor, and a doctor that you trust and that you have a lot of, because we've had an experience before I had, the triplets with another doctor, and it wasn't positive. But with this doctor, it was unbelievable. So just making sure you have a good team. So I just hope to other families that are out there, when you have a premature baby, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have a premature baby again. Things can be different the next time around, because you have your doctors and you have the knowledge that you didn't previously have about your body and how it works, right? So
absolutely. So let's talk about your book now.
Oh, yeah, sure.
See Me for Me. It's such a wonderful book. Obviously, you're inspired by the triplets, but why was it important for you to have that book out?
Yes. So See Me for Me, I have it here too. It is inspired by my kids. And it is just, it's a colorful picture book that's catered to the primary grades. I thought it was so important because over the years, I have been asked by my friends and by people I don't even know and people I know through 3-B, are there any good books out there about kids with disabilities so that I can introduce my child who doesn't have a disability to children who are in a wheelchair or otherwise? And there are some great books out there, but the difference with See Me for Me is that it's based on real people. And I think that when it's based on real people, it can be a real conversation starter. It allows children, it gives them the license, I guess, to ask questions that you can't really ask when you're reading about somebody who's not real, So I used to always read like Zoom by Robert Munch. It's a great, fun book, but it's about a wheelchair. It's not about the kid in the wheelchair. Mm-hmm. And there's a big difference, right? Because it's not just about that. It's about the person. And so I thought it was just a beautiful conversation starter to teach kids about the importance of empathy, putting yourself inside the shoes of someone else so that you can understand what they feel when they're going through something, and inclusion and feeling a part of a community. And this book the response from it has been so positive and so great for kids with disabilities because, it represents them, but also kids without disabilities because they learn about people.
So how did the triplets react to the book? Because it's about them. It's their story. You have their pictures. Can I share the picture here? Let me show the picture of them on the last page oh no, not on the last page. Where is is on the
dedication? Beginning? This one?
Here, yes.
Yes, this is the dedication page. So there's Taylor, my daughter, Cole is in the middle, and Brody. Oh, excuse me, I'm going the other side. And Brody on the end there. And they're awesome. I did that right in the beginning so that kids, when they're reading this book, they could see these are real people. These aren't just characters in a book. And because of that, it just sparks their curiosity and they want to know more. And so my kids, when I was writing this, because they were a part of the process from the beginning, I told them, I want to write this book. I want to write something about you. You guys will be the characters. How do you feel about that? Because really, everything I do, I have to make sure, especially now, they're older, they have opinions on everything, and make sure that they're cool, not only cool with it, but they want me to do it. Mm-hmm. And they were so excited to be a part of this. Each of them has their own little section. It tells them about what they like, what their interests are. And I got their input on that to make sure that it wasn't just what I thought, it's what they want. And even the illustrator, when we got all the pictures, like the samples of what they would look like, made sure with the kids that they were good with it. They made some suggestions on how to change it. They were a part of the whole thing. So really, it shouldn't just say by Dana Geall, it should say Taylor, Cole, and Brody.
That is wonderful. Dana, but let's talk about what is the goal for this book? Because you want to be in every classroom in Canada, hopefully beyond Canada. What do you want to accomplish by telling that story? Which is a story of your triplets, but a story of many families.
Well, that's the whole point, right? It's about my kids, but it's not. It's supposed to be a conversation starter to talk about, you have this kid in your school or this child in your program, and you want to be able to relate it to their life as well. And that's what's been so beautiful about it. So really my goal for this book is that it's in classrooms across the country and beyond, because then teachers, because it's parents that can read it to their kids at home and their child will have questions. And it's teachers in school that will be able to do a lesson around it. I even created some lessons on my website, seemeforme.ca, that teachers can do with their kids. But the ultimate goal is that it is a tool that's used to teach kids about empathy and inclusion, so that they treat kids like my kids like your son, differently than they do now. Because I don't know about you, I'm sure you've experienced the same thing, because I think everybody has. When you're out and about and your kid is just having a good time at the apple orchard or at the mall or at a movie, they get stared at all the time. It's every single time we go out. And now my son Cole always says to me, I wish I had a book on me so I can give that kid see me for because it teaches them that at the end of the day, yes, they have a wheelchair. Yes, they have a cochlear implant. Yes, they eat out of a feeding tube or whatever it is. They're kids at the end of the day. That's what they are. They're kids just like you. They enjoy the same things that you do, and they just want to be loved and included like everybody else, because that's what they deserve. And I really hope that this book has the reach that it has the potential to have.
Absolutely. It is so important. And yes, we had several conversations with several groups across Canada about inclusion, diversity, because it was World Cerebral Palsy Day, but that conversation cannot stop in one day a year. That conversation is throughout the year in every place that we go, because we are creating the future for other families who will come after us.
Exactly.
So I think this book is so important to really open people's minds, eyes, and hearts to include our children, because as you said, they want to be children. They want to participate. They want to be included. And ask questions. Why you use a wheelchair? Why you have a cochlear implant? It's totally fine, because a lot of times kids come and ask Gabriel why he uses a wheelchair. The parent becomes like, oh my God, why did you ask that question? Yeah. But I love when they come and ask questions, because that's what you're talking about, the conversation, the education.
How does Gabe feel? How does Gabe feel when they ask him the question? Does he love it?
He loves it, because he's like, oh, yes, this is me.
Exactly. And it's better than just somebody being like, staring at you. It's that's uncomfortable. That's where you feel, it hurts your heart. It really does. And the worst is when you see a parent grab their kid's arm and pull them in the other direction. Like that just takes it to a different level. And it's not because they're actually trying to do the right thing when they're doing that. I don't think that it's coming from a malicious place. I think it's coming from a place of, oh, I'm mortified, my kid is staring at your kid. But instead, get down on your kid's level. Say, oh, yes, that child's in a wheelchair. They use it the same way I wear glasses to help me see. It helps them move around. It helps them have independence. And then that kid will go, oh, I see what you're saying. And then they're relatable. And then it's different. And then they might smile at your kid, or even better, say hi, right? And there isn't always like a time and a place where you have the chance to ask questions. Sometimes it's not the time or place to go up to someone and say, why are you in a wheelchair? Of course. But there are times where it is welcomed. And, I just think that if we proactively do things like have discussions with our children about people with disabilities, read them books like this book to help that discussion to happen, your child is going to be a more empathic person as a result of that, because they're going to understand. And I think that's just the importance of reading books like See Me For Me. There are other books as well that you can read to your children, and the results are beautiful. And they'll see that in how they treat everybody, not just people with disabilities.
Absolutely. Then our time is coming to an end, but I would like to leave a message to parents who are probably in the beginning of their journey. They're scared how life is going to look like for them, what it means to them. What do you have to tell them?
Oh, wow. I mean, there's so many things, but I have to say, you will get through it. Just know that. I know that might sound like a cliche thing to say, but you will get through it. Just focus on the day to day. Don't think too far in the future, and you will persevere. You'll get through it, and so will your beautiful child, because they are just kids that want to be loved.
Absolutely. So Dana, thank you so much for joining us here today. Always so great to talking to you, learning from you, and the amazing work that you're doing and raising those beautiful children. And they are on Instagram. They all have their social media, sharing their life. That is so beautiful and very empowering for all of us. Dana, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all that you do, Fabiana. You're amazing.
Oh, thank you. And to all of you watching us live today, thank you so much for being here with us. And the video of today's session and all the other videos from our live series are available on our website, which is right here, the Canadian preemies.org. And I want to thank our sponsor, AstraZeneca, for their ongoing support of our education sessions. And we are a charitable organization, and we believe that through support and education, we can empower families, ensuring they are ready to care for their babies. Please visit our website, consider making a donation. Together, we can create a brighter future for all our families. And we'll see you again next Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Stay well.